get started, I see people joining. So, welcome to the New York Information Security Meetup slash the Cyber Guild in the kind of the weekly podcast. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Jummy Adejuyigbe. I think hopefully I pronounced it correctly, but you can probably fix that. Senior Director for Risk Management at KPMG. But maybe a disclaimer, all your, we can say all your opinions are your own. You're not representing KPMG by any way, shape, or form. And what we're going to do today is just to have a casual conversation about cybersecurity and other topics. And hopefully, you'll get to know Jumi and have some insight to what she's gone through, a career path and insights to some different areas within cyber. And the reason why I do this is that Jumi, you're very busy. I'm sure you have a big role. And it's tough for people to get a glimpse of what you do on your day-to-day life. People can't physically, well, even pre-COVID, they couldn't go in and knock on your door and say, "Hey, Jimmy, do you mind? Can I spend a few minutes and pick your brain on a couple of topics?" So you just don't have the time. So that's the idea. Is to get a sense of who you are. How have you got to cybersecurity? What do you like? What do you like about it, and so on. So why don't we get started? And first of all, thank you very much for joining. Much appreciated. Thanks all for joining. You can interrupt, on the chat and ask some questions if you want, during that process, and we'll probably wrap up within 35 to 40 minutes at the most. So maybe Jumi, how did you get started? What was your career path like?
So good afternoon, everyone. And David, thank you so much for having me here. I think it's a great opportunity to, connect with individuals and other cybersecurity professionals in the field. And I think cybersecurity professionals are great at giving back. So I'll count this as my opportunity to, connect with other professionals and give back, and tell my little story. So talking about my career path, I'd say my career path is an interesting one, even if I, only think so myself. So I started off with a degree in engineering physics. However, that was really, really very challenging. And I knew that I was going to build a career in engineering physics. So the good thing was that I was exposed to computers and computer programming at an early age in middle school. So I decided to take a master's in computer science or computer engineering. And through the process of researching for colleges and programs, I kind of stumbled on a management information security program that had a specialization in information security. And I was just like intrigued and I enrolled for that. And through the course of that program, I had the opportunity of connecting with cybersecurity professionals in the field to get a sense for their areas of specialization, how they got to where they were. And what I tried to do was almost try to replicate my career path based on what they had done and the aspects of security I was interested in. So that's how I started off. And fortunately, right after I completed my master's program in MIS with the specialization in information security, I got the opportunity to work with a boutique consulting firm where I helped with IT audits, regulatory compliance related risk assessments. We did lots of fiscal security, social engineering type assessments. And I think that opportunity really gave me a glimpse into several aspects of security. And I was able to somewhat try to narrow it down to what I really was interested in. And that led me to my next job, which was with a large financial institution where I was part of the vulnerability assessment team, and we were responsible for performing penetration testing on applications. And honestly, I would say that was really cool because I did not have any exposure or experience with application pen testing. But I was fortunate to have this group of people just take a chance on me and invest in me and train me because, like we all know, right, some of the professions or fields in security are very specialized and it's not stuff you can learn in college. So it was great to have that opportunity where the organization invested in me. I got to learn how to perform pen testing, and I became really good at it. And I spent about 5 years in that organization before moving to my next role in my current organization, where I was brought in back then to help develop the software security program and take it to the next level. And that's what I did for about 5 years before transitioning into my current role, where I lead the security assessment team, where we do a bunch of different types of security assessment type work. But to talk about my path, right? It was just the availability of individuals in the industry that served as role models, served as mentors, willing to take a chance on me, give me that opportunity. And, me taking that step of faith and just leaping in or stepping into the unknown to just, embrace those challenges. So that's really a summary of my story.
No, that's amazing. So let me ask you a couple questions related to that, and thanks for sharing that. So first and foremost, taking an engineering degree is not trivial, and it's not a lot of times. You can see all those STEM programs, especially for women. There's not that many women out there. I know I took computer science, and there were, I would say you can count on one hand the number of women that were part of the program. So what attracted you to take a STEM, engineering program that I'm sure wasn't easy? What, that's not a natural choice. So maybe you can kind of, did you grow up like, picking things apart? Did your parents encourage you to, do other stuff? Like what kind of led to that? Let's pick this apart a little bit.
Yeah, that is a great question. So I would say, really, when I look at my background, it probably was a natural choice because my mother is a professor of chemistry, organic chemistry, and my dad is a professor of sociology. So in my house, it's flipped the other way around. So I think, I think naturally it was just like, okay, science, STEM was just, hey, girls can do it as well. So it really, wasn't even a thought that, there's some aspects or some type of subjects that are more geared towards females or males. So I think for me it was more of a natural choice, and the exposure early into just, computers, programming. My mom bought a computer in the 80s and we just played around with it, not to date myself, but, that exposure was just really, I think that helped me help just drive me in that path of, technology.
Yeah, we're all children of the 80s. So, so the truth comes out. So the reason why I asked that specifically is that, I've had somebody on this show that said that, their parents worked at a factory. And so they tried that and said, well, I don't want to be working in 110 degrees heat. And therefore, I'm going to be working in an office on a computer. That's how they started. And so, it's really interesting that you brought up that your mom, your mother was a chemistry professor, and therefore, the thought of not doing something technical did not even cross your mind. So this is amazing. This is a really good starting point. So, and then I think that the what you mentioned specifically about, excuse me, about mentorship and finding role models. Did you have, aside from your parents, obviously, mentors along the way? Because I can't stress this enough. This is something that I think is, every cybersecurity professional should try to find somebody out there to look for, look out and get some insight. Did you have people along the way that helped you out?
I would say yes, I had lots of great people along the way that helped me out. And, I'd start by saying that not all of these individuals were official mentors,
Mhm.
but they kind of feel that role in how they interacted with me and how they pushed me to stretch myself and go above and beyond. So and I think that really made a significant difference in my progress or progression in my career, because I had those people that just really took that interest in me and gave me the resources or the guidance that I needed to make the right decisions, or also help to open doors for me. Right, I think definitely I had great mentors along the way, even if they didn't know it at that point in time, right, that they were serving in that role.
Yeah, and it's a great point as well. You don't have to put quote unquote, you know, table a mentor. You know, a mentor can be anybody. It can be your colleague who's great at what they do. It can be your boss who's great at what they do, and you look up to them. And they can be a mentor without even knowing that, right? As you mentioned. And then you also touched upon a very critical aspect of cybersecurity, as you mentioned, and you kind of come across that pretty quickly. It's a very specialized industry. That means that even within the cyberspace, there's a lot of specializations from, endpoint security, networking, compliance, you name it. So how did you, and you had a chance to kind of work with different areas. How did you know, which area specifically did you like to, specialize and kind of work with, throughout your career?
So I would say that when I got the first opportunity to work with a consulting firm that my first job out of I'd say college, right? I got exposed to a number of aspects of security, the IT audits, and I just knew audits are great, they're needed, but not a thing for me. It's just, performing risk assessments, that was fun. But it was just a lot of documentation. And then, the guys on the team were involved with lots of network pen testing, application pen testing. And I was like, I do not have any experience with performing pen testing, and I really was curious about that because I just thought that was really hands-on, and it was just really fascinating. You can make an application do something it wasn't intent that it was not, you know, um, designed to do,
Mhm.
and exfiltrate data or purchase more items than you paid for. That just really sounded very cool, and I just wanted to learn more about that. And I think that desire was what drove me to specialize in, at least for the past 10 years, or the 10 years of my career spent in software security, because I think just that intrigue of what you can do, just the it wasn't defined. You can go, as a hacker, you just have to think outside the box. Just that freedom to just explore really was, I think, what drove my interest into software security.
And it's almost like you're almost do an investigative role where you're almost like a little bit of Sherlock Holmes, where you're trying different things and trying to find the root cause of things. So what's your day-to-day role look like today? Like you obviously you have a senior title. Do you still do hands-on, pen testing for or what's your kind of day-to-day? What do you like? What do you don't like about it, possibly?
Okay, I can share on that. Do I still do pen testing? I'll take that question first. I
Yeah.
do not. I miss it sometimes, but I do not have time to do pen testing anymore. However, today my role has evolved. So I lead the team that is responsible for a number of services. So my team performs third-party risk assessments, network pen testing, application pen testing, static code review, and we also perform risk assessments on IT projects that are deployed within our organization. So my role spans across all of those different types of services. So on a day-to-day basis, I do focus on helping my team navigate through challenging, complex situations they're trying to resolve regarding the assessments they're performing. And in addition to that, I work with a lot of senior leadership business application owners that are trying to navigate the requirements that they need to comply with, and negotiating with them on, what the compensating controls are, and just having lots of conversations on how do we help the business move forward in a secure way and mitigating risk and all of those types of conversations. So I would say, from my perspective, what I really enjoy in what I do day to day is really the opportunity to empower my team, give them the resources they need to be successful at what they do. Because when they're successful, then I don't have to deal with a lot of fire drills, but that is work in progress. What I do not enjoy is putting out fires that should not have been started or could have been avoided in the first place. That those
So Chewy, give me an idea of what a fire is for you specifically. What does that mean?
Wow, fires vary. You can have, hypothetically, let's
Of
say
course.
a team that may just have this solution they've been working on for months. And all of a sudden, they have a plan to go live next week. And they just realize, oh, we've not done X, we've not done static code review, we've not done pen testing, and we need to schedule all of those now. And then there are all these findings, and we need to go live. And then you have to have those conversations and like, guys, we know the process. Why didn't you get this done when you started? So those are the type of fires that I get to, try to put out to see how we can mitigate risk and then still enable the business. So that's just, a hypothetical example of some of the things that we'll have to walk through every day about, security is holding us up, can't we move faster? Stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's obviously everything's hypothetical. It's never actually happened, of course. So you mentioned, compliance and regulatory. You mentioned the business and executives and so on. What do you find are the kind of the biggest gaps right now for companies? It seems like the environment is getting more and more complex, both from the enterprise side with all the connecting systems out there, from the technology side. There's a lot of moving parts as well. I think even every single application talks to another 10 applications as well. And then regulatory, of course. So there's all these, and then, all these complexities that, were not there maybe 5, 10 years ago, when you had a standalone application. So what do you find is their main concern, and how do you communicate, basically the kind of, hey, don't worry, we'll take care of it? What's your, how do you analyze the, their concerns in terms of aligning the business and, with the actual, the actual security controls?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and a big challenge. I think considering where we are today compared to 5, 10 years ago, the environment is really complex. However, I think, what we try to do is really make sure that in order to piece together or just, make those complex situations easier to navigate through, we ensure that we embed our discussions early in the process, because I think education is very critical. When the business owners are aware of what the requirements are, when business owners or application project teams are aware of the expectations from a security perspective, and those are integrated early in the life cycle, it makes the conversations easier to have later because all that has been embedded in. If that is not done, it just makes the complexity more complex, right?
Hmm.
Because they didn't factor all of that in. So I think education and working very closely, integrating security early in the process really helps to drive the requirements in a way that it is built in the design phase and everyone is happy at the end of the day, or at least happier, right?
Hmm.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it makes total sense. So you basically trying to preempt that, as you mentioned, and basically into wind the process within what they're, already doing, and not get to the point where it's like it's an add-on, or just before product release, all of a sudden come out and say, okay, we have to do the security controls. At what point do you get involved, when they're, launching a product? They're saying, okay, we need KPMG to come over and somebody to take a look at it, or is it typically after the fact? Like, at what stage do you get involved in projects?
Yeah, we do not want to get involved at the end because we're going to be bad news. So getting involved during the design phase, when you're solutioning, idealizing that product or solution, whatever it is, we want to get involved at that point, right? So that way we understand what is being done and provide guidance, to the team as they go through that process. Otherwise, getting involved at the end is like, bolting on security after the fact and like, oh, we hope it sticks. That is not the ideal approach. So we want, and for me, this is something that I'm hoping we can get to, not just as my organization, but just, as an industry where we have, solutions that are secure by design. It's not an afterthought.
So that's a great point. So in my mind, not everyone is KPMG customer, right? Because some of them cannot afford it. It depends on the requirements, depending on the size of the organization. So what would you recommend if, if you're a smaller, medium-sized company and you still want to release secure applications, but don't have the means or, the kind of the process in place? What would you recommend would be like the top three things they can do today to make sure that they don't get to the point where, again, to have a security by design, but don't get to the point where they release a product that's insecure?
A couple of things I recommend is that you can start off by having developers trained. I'm a big fan of developers being that security champion, understanding secure coding best practices and integrating that into their product. There are lots of solutions out there. I don't want to call names, but there are lots of solutions out there that help with gamified developer training that just helps them in an environment that they're familiar with, to fix vulnerabilities in code in real time, right? And have that type of interaction and education. I think that is vital because if the code is developed securely, then there really isn't anything we're doing after the fact, right? I think that's one thing. And also getting the right tools. There are tools out there that are available, and some are even free that you can integrate into your process where you're running some, tests or scans that helps to identify vulnerabilities at different phases of the project, right? So those are some of the things I would recommend for organizations that may not have as much resources, to get a third independent
Review.
coming to get a pen test done.
And what's your take on the use of open sourced, basically code? It seems like there's an industry kind of, trend now to think twice before using or just looking at some, because there's a lot of code that's been already written and they've been used, like a lot of binaries are being used. Um, what's your take on that? Can companies do anything to protect themselves that way?
Yeah, so when it comes to open source, there is, in this day and age, there's no way you can tell developers do not use open source because it's bad for you. Because that's not going to happen, right? It's just an easy way for them to pull things together and they don't have to do all that from scratch, right?
Right.
Reinvent the wheel, right? So from that perspective, from an efficiency perspective, open source is great. However, when we look at the security aspect, we want to make sure there's a balance. So the open source libraries or components or frameworks that are being used, we want to make sure that they are free of vulnerabilities that can be exploited. I think those are some of the key aspects that should be factored in. You need to make sure that if you're using open source components, it is probably the latest version that is free of vulnerabilities, and you're monitoring to make sure that if there's a new CVE out, you are patching that as quickly as you can, to just make sure your solution is secure. So that would be my recommendation. Open source is here to stay, and that's fine, but we just need to use it responsibly.
Yeah, that's wonderful feedback. There's a question here from Josh. It says, "What trends have evolved out of pandemic era data controls need for new architecture in terms of third-party assessments and other privacy concerns?"
Can you repeat the question again? That was a long
Yeah,
one.
it says, "What trends have evolved out of the pandemic era data controls need for new architectures, perhaps, and in terms of third-party assessment and other privacy concerns?" You mentioned that you do part of your responsibility is do third-party assessments as well.
Right. So I think, for a lot of organizations, and I'm just going to speak very
Yeah,
generically,
broadly. Yep.
specific to just not specific to any organization, just my perspective and opinion. So, a lot of organizations had to make changes to how they work. And that introduced some risk at that point in time, right? When you talk about how do your employees connect to the network, what kind of data do they have access to, and how can you protect that data when you're not in an office, right? If they're printing stuff and they're leaving it on their desk at home, who's doing clean desk policy at home, right? And
No
if they're
one.
shred that information? Are they just throwing it in their garbage? Or, there's so many things that I think had come up to the forefront as a result of the pandemic, and organizations are rethinking some of the approaches that need to be implemented to secure data, because now everyone is working from home. And also in terms of third party vendors or assessments, those are things that vendors are asking, or clients are asking their vendors, that how are you protecting my data in the era of COVID-19, and what are you doing differently? So I think a lot of organizations may need to factor in additional policy, and most importantly, education of their employees, to say, now you're working from home, these are XYZ things you need to do differently. How do you secure your home network? How do you protect, access to sensitive data when you print stuff? What do you do with it? So I think that's my take on that question. I hope it helps to provide some perspective.
No, absolutely. And kind of the next question, because you're obviously big on education. We touched upon different areas, educating the employees, education of the people that report to you, and so on. What do you do from your own perspective? How do you stay on top of the latest trends and technologies, and how do you specifically enhance your skill set? You obviously, again, you're very busy. How do you know what to focus on? There are just so many emerging trends right now.
And that's a great question. I'm just thinking in my head right now that I do not have time to keep up, but I have to, because that's the only way I can, keep being relevant. So I do, as part of my annual training, I make sure that I look for, from a strategic perspective, what do I see happening in the industry that I think my team should be implementing? What are the trends? And I try to find trainings associated with that. I will call out SANS, those are my favorite, so
Be great.
anything, because they're really technical. So I love the fact that going to depth. I mean, if that's okay, I would, call them out here. But,
Absolutely.
those are, I try to look for those types of trainings. And also, there are lots of articles out there. There are podcasts. So I think, just really looking for trends in the industry and looking for trainings that map to those trends. And I think going for conferences is a great way. There are certain conferences that I like to attend, because it really goes into the trends, the future trends, like the Gartners of the world, right? Those are great, because it helps to benchmark, okay, where am I today, and what are the gaps that, I see, and where's the industry going in the next 5 years? So that really helps to just, gather that information to decide, how should we invest in education? What should we invest in, from my perspective and for my team?
And if someone doesn't have the means to go out to conferences, what do they recommend? Like, SANS probably is a good starting point. Um, and there's a lot of, as you mentioned, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of good resources online. There's no excuse nowadays not to be on top of things. Talk about the gaps from now and the gaps in a few years from now. So if you had the crystal ball in terms of seeing what's coming down the pipe, um, where do you see from a technology perspective, how are things going to look like in the next, 12, 18 months, from where you're sitting?
I think in the next 12, 18 months, my opinion is, from a technology perspective, there probably will be a rapid increase in the move to cloud, that, yeah, I mean, with COVID, I think that COVID-19 has really accelerated that, that would be my perspective. And also, I think there is a need for more, should I say, automation, artificial intelligence embedded into our some of the tools that we have today. From my perspective, right, from a security assessment perspective, there's certain tools that are just not as effective as I think they should be. Still dealing with lots of false positives and stuff like that. I mean, we need to get to a point where all of that is history, right? At least false positive rates should be about maybe 1%, or something really minimal. So those are some of the things I think future trends I think we would see in the industry, or I hope that we'll see in the industry, as regards to definitely an increase in the use of cloud, migration to the cloud, and then artificial intelligence automation embedded into our processes with more efficiency and less false positive rates.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I think I've had somebody on the show, that Kelly, that mentioned that cybersecurity is one of the only areas where companies release products and they're not really productizing. These products don't have almost like not quality control. Maybe it's not the right word, but then some of them don't work as expected, and they in every other industry they will not survive. But it seems like in cybersecurity it's kind of okay. As you mentioned, they might have 10% false positives, and it's okay. But in any other industry, it will be completely gone. So, yeah, I agree with you. We're probably going to see some trends of getting these more effective and better. So maybe like kind of parting words. Oh, there's somebody is asking another question here. Um, talk about machine learning and AI and the risks due to data and models. I guess specifically about any initiative from the growth of use of machine learning and AI. I don't know if you have insight into that.
Yeah, I really do not have experience with, implementing any of this, but I do know that there is, a large an opportunity, to leverage some of these elements in our tools, right? In third-party solutions, definitely. But I probably can't speak a lot to the details of that.
I think the more computing power is going to increase, the better these tools are going to be. And I think right now we have pretty good tools, I think, for very specific domains.
Right.
We don't have yet there's no such thing yet as artificial intelligence. Let me just say it out loud. But there is, basic machine learning that really works well for narrow domains. So maybe it's just kind of a parting words, maybe some positive notes from, being under quarantine for all this time. Maybe things have kind of worked out for you, from your work, maybe personal life, and then maybe like just give an idea for people how it can find you and maybe connect to you. You're obviously a great mentor to your employees and people that work with you, but maybe there's some other folks that maybe not officially but would love to get in touch.
Okay, of course. So, share a couple of positive notes. I think when the requirement for everyone to work remotely kicked in, it was just, unknown to everyone for the most part, at least within my organization, on how effective that will be. So, I think the exciting thing was that it was people brought their best self to work each day and they delivered above and beyond. So that was really impressive, from my perspective. And, positive note from a personal perspective, right? This is the longest time my family has been together in one place, for this long. I mean, yeah, so that was great to just, be able to spend time together as a family. So yeah, I'm not like I would have, preferred if it was without, the pandemic, but, we'll take what we have. But in terms of reaching out to me, I'm available on LinkedIn. I think that's the best place to reach me. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. So, Jimmy, we ran out of time, but again, much appreciated. Looking forward to hopefully, when things open up in New York City, maybe we'll have you in person one of these days. We're kind of on the right track, I think. Things are looking up and up. And again, I appreciate you taking the time, provide some insight, and thanks to everyone for joining. Looking forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
so much, David, for having me, and thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Take care. Thank you all.